Is cash flow in real estate investing just a myth? There are tons of influencers out there bragging about their cash flow. I'm sure you've seen those posts about people making tens of thousands every month from just a few rental properties. But meanwhile, there are other investors who say the whole thing is just a sham and you'll never be able to live off rental income. So which is it? Is cash flow possible for real estate investors? Today, we'll explore. Hey everyone, it's Dave, head of real estate investing here at BiggerPockets. And I was just recently browsing the BiggerPockets forums and came across this question and I wanted to weigh in. Today's question comes from a BiggerPockets community member named Mary, who says a few years ago, she was listening to an investor, a very successful investor from Manhattan Beach and Phoenix, who's been in the real estate investing game for 30 to 40 years, who told Mary that, quote, a property does not really cash flow until it's paid off. Mary goes on to say then that she's been looking at her properties and about half of her properties cash flow anywhere from $800 to $1,000 a month, but the remaining don't cash flow at all. And she feels that even those properties that do cash flow don't really make a huge impact on her because when a tenant moves out or she has to do some turnover, the house sits empty for a month, that eats up all of her cash flow. So she's wondering, does a property not really cash flow till it's paid off? That's where we come in. We're going to answer this question right now. I'll give you the TLDR. I do not think that cash flow is a myth. I have non-paid off properties today that offer substantial cash flow. I have profitable properties that my tax records can prove that show that cash flow is real. But I do think the spirit of this question is important because people really misunderstand cash flow. There are actually two things, given Mary's question, that we need to dig in on. The first is the definition of cash flow in the first place, and the second is the role of cash flow in your portfolio. Let's do these one at a time. We'll start with the definition of cash flow. And I will admit this topic gets me a little bit riled up because what Mary said, and so many people on social media describe as cash flow, is not actually cash flow. I'll start by just giving you the real definition. Cash flow is equal to gross revenue, which is all the money you collect and rent every month, minus all of your expenses. That includes your mortgage, of course, and your taxes and your insurance, but it also has to include everything else, right? Because some people omit some pretty crucial expenses. Vacancy, like Mary mentioned, that is an expense. Repairs, that is an expense. Capital expenditures, that is an expense. Turnover costs when people move out, that is an expense. Meaning that if you are not subtracting all of those things from your gross revenue, you are not actually calculating cash flow correctly. And this is why it sort of makes me mad when I hear people say real estate offers cash flow until something breaks, because if you're looking at your rental properties that way and you think you have cash flow only until something breaks, you're just doing it wrong. You should be setting aside money every month for repairs. And that money you set aside is not cash flow. That is not your profit. It's money that belongs to your property and your business. You're just holding on to it. Let me just show you how I calculate it. And keep in mind, I wrote an entire book on this, so this is something I'm a stickler about. All right, so if you look at my spreadsheet that I use here, you can download this for free, by the way, on BiggerPockets.com. So when I look at cash flow for this property, this is a real deal I was looking at the other day. That was gonna make $4,200 per year, not month, in real cash flow. I'm not just taking rents and subtracting a couple things. I'm starting with my rents, right? My gross income is going to be $63,000 per year. But then I am subtracting so many things here. I'm taking my property taxes, right? I'm taking out my insurance, those you might know about. Hopefully you know about maintenance and repairs. But we also have utilities, things like sewer fees or garbage. Turnover. This is one of those things that Mary mentioned where when a tenant moves out, you have to fix a couple of things. Put that in there. We also have things like property management in here. In my rental calculation up here, I also subtract $5,000 a year for vacancy because that is an expense. The last thing I want to call out here, and this is probably the most common thing that people omit here, is capital costs. Capital expenditures are things like repairing a roof or siding or HVAC. Things that are big, expensive things, but just don't come up every year. But you'll see I'm setting aside $416 every single month for that. And I've calculated that by thinking through how often I'm actually going to have to repair those. So I think I'm going to have to repair my roof every 25 years, and it's going to cost me 18 grand. My HVAC is going to go every 20 years, and that's going to cost me 16 grand, and so on. And I annualize this, figure out that it's going to cost me on average about 5 grand a year, and then I set that money aside before I calculate my cash flow. So this is what I mean when I say that when you actually calculate cash flow correctly, there can be cash flow in real estate. As I'm showing in this example, even with all these expenditures, even with a 7.4% interest rate, this deal I was looking at on market will still offer real cash flow of $4,200. So cash flow is clearly not a myth. But as I said at the beginning, I think people just fundamentally misunderstand the role of cash flow, which I'm going to get to in just a minute. But first, I want to remind you that peak rental season is around the corner. Are you prepared for success? Avail is the go-to solution for do-it-yourself landlords. You can sign up for free to list your property on top sites, screen tenants, and collect rent at no cost to you. For just $9 a month per unit, upgrade to the premium plan for customizable applications and leases, waived rent collection fees, and priority support. Plus, access rent analysis reports to set the right price and promote listings for added exposure on partner sites. Sign up for free today at avail.co. That's avail.co and get started for free. So let's talk about this role of cash flow, because this is where I do identify with Mary and her advisor that said that properties don't really cash flow until they're paid off. Because the reality is cash flow is typically not going to be very strong at the outset of an investment. And this is okay. This is how it's supposed to be. I've talked a lot about this recently and my upside framework that I use for buying deals. But personally, I try to ensure that I can break even with real cash flow within the first year of my deal. But anything more than that is just gravy. As I just showed you, a deal I was looking at and considering offering on will offer real cash flow in year one of 2.5%. I think that's pretty good. Don't get me wrong, 2.5% cash flow is not going to change my life. But strong cash flow, what I'm actually going for, is a long-term outcome. This is what comes from holding on to properties as rents increase year over year, but your debt service, meaning the amount you pay on your mortgage, remains fixed. And this is just the reality of the situation. If you're expecting strong cash flow right away, you're just going to be disappointed. But if you are patient about growing cash flow over time, you're going to be thrilled. As someone who has been investing in real estate for 15 years, I have seen my cash flow grow to the point where I could use it. Right now, my full-time job covers my living expenses, so I don't need to draw my cash flow, but I could, and I would if I needed it. Instead, right now, I invest it back into my portfolio. It still offers me a lot of peace of mind, which is wonderful. But because I waited 4, 5, 6 years from the purchase of my property, I was able to use my cash flow to help me get through grad school. And I can use it now to reinvest in my portfolio and to provide me with that peace of mind. Just as an example, the property in my portfolio that I've owned the longest, I've owned for about 11 years now, and it cash flows somewhere between $2,000 and $2,200 per month in real cash flow. That's after all of those expenses. That's just one property. Other deals that I bought in that era, in the mid 2010s, are still all getting over a 10% cash on cash return. But when I look at properties I bought last year, real cash flow, I'm getting like $100 a month, a 2 or 3% cash on cash return, just like the spreadsheet that I just showed you. And this sort of jives with what Mary said in her question, right? She said about half of her properties are cash flowing like $800 to $1,000 a month. The other half aren't cash flowing all that much. And that makes perfect sense to me, right? The half that are cash flowing are probably deals that she's owned for a long time. And the ones that aren't cash flowing are probably deals that she hasn't owned for a long time. My guess is that in 5 to 10 years, Mary will be making great cash flow on all of her properties, just like I'm expecting for the deals that I bought last year, them all to be offering strong cash flow 5 to 10 years from now as well. So getting back to our original question, is cash flow a myth? No, it is just misunderstood and often miscalculated. If you have the right perspective on the role of cash flow and you calculate it correctly, you'll see that real estate investing is the best path to cash flow of any asset class out there. That's my take on cash flow in real estate investing, but I would love to hear your opinions in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching. For BiggerPockets, I'm Dave Meyer, and I'll see you next time.